You lie awake at 2 in the morning doing math. 6 hours left. 5, 4.5. Your mind is running through tomorrow's meeting, while your body refuses to cooperate. You check the clock. You check it again 12 minutes later. You start calculating how wrecked you'll feel if you fall asleep right now versus in another hour. You assume this is a modern problem, a side effect of screens, stress, streetlights, and a world that never really goes dark. For decades, that assumption came with a companion myth that somewhere out there, humans without electricity are sleeping the way nature intended, 10 hours a night. Deep, unbroken, enviable sleep. No alarms, no anxiety, no 2 a.m., ceiling staring. In 2015, a UCLA neuroscientist named Jerome Siegel decided to actually check. He and his team strapped sleep tracking devices onto members of 3 different societies that still live largely without electricity: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of the Kalahari in Namibia, and the Tsimane of the Bolivian Amazon. These are 3 separate, unrelated populations on 3 different continents, living 3 different lifestyles: foraging, a mix of foraging and small-scale farming, horticulture, and hunting. The point of using all 3 groups was to see whether any common human pattern showed up across populations that share only one real thing in common. None of them use artificial light the way industrialized societies do. What Siegel's team found broke the 10-hour myth completely. Average sleep across all 3 groups, somewhere between 5 hours and 42 minutes and 7 hours and 10 minutes a night. Not 10 hours. Not even close to 10 hours. That's roughly the same range most sleep-deprived Americans report getting on an average weeknight. Here's the detail that gets me every time. Insomnia, the thing keeping you up right now, was almost non-existent in these populations. Not rare. Nearly absent. The Hadza language doesn't even have a dedicated word for the condition. So, the mystery isn't really why we sleep less than we think we should. It's why we lie awake feeling broken about it, while people getting roughly the same amount of sleep don't seem bothered by it at all. Let's stack the evidence, one layer at a time. Siegel's data showed something else important. None of the 3 groups went to sleep at sunset. They stayed active for hours after dark, usually around a fire, talking, tending children, finishing tasks, telling stories. On average, people fell asleep several hours after sunset and woke before sunrise. Sleep tracked temperature more closely than it tracked light. People tended to fall asleep as the ambient temperature was dropping and wake up as it started climbing again near dawn. That connects to something called thermoregulation, your body's own internal system for managing its temperature. Your core body temperature naturally drops before sleep and rises again before waking. In these communities, without walls, blankets, or thermostats to interfere, that internal clock was left to run largely on its own, guided mostly by the natural rise and fall of outdoor temperature rather than any clock or schedule. There's also a seasonal piece worth including, because it complicates the picture in an honest way rather than smoothing it over. Sleep duration shifted slightly with the seasons in Siegel's data: a little longer in winter, a little shorter in summer. But the shift was modest, not the dramatic hibernation-style pattern some popular articles have since claimed. Researchers are still working out exactly how strong that seasonal effect is across different environments and different populations, so it's worth holding that particular detail loosely, rather than treating it as settled. A separate body of work adds useful context here too. Anthropologist Carol Worthman, who has spent years studying sleep ecology across cultures, has pointed out that in many small-scale societies, sleep isn't the solitary sealed-off event. It tends to be in industrialized homes. People often sleep near others' family members, sometimes near a fire, sometimes with soft background noise and movement continuing around them. Sleep, in other words, has frequently been a social experience layered on top of a biological one, not a private retreat behind a closed bedroom door. Now, a separate line of evidence, from a completely different time and place, adds another wrinkle to this story. And it's important not to blur it together with the Hadza, San, and Tsimane data, because it comes from a different population, in a different era, studied through a different kind of evidence entirely. Historian A. Roger Ekirch spent years combing through diaries, court depositions, medical texts, and literature from early modern Europe, roughly the 16th and 17th centuries. He documented hundreds of casual references to something historians now call first sleep and second sleep, a pattern in which people went to bed shortly after dark, woke naturally, for perhaps an hour in the middle of the night to pray, talk quietly, tend to something practical, or simply lie awake thinking, and then drifted back to sleep until morning. This is a claim specifically about pre-industrial Europeans, documented through written records they themselves left behind. Not a claim about all humans, everywhere, at all times. Historians still debate how universal the practice really was across different regions, seasons, and social classes, and how much of it reflected biology versus simply the practical rhythms of candlelit agrarian life. So here are two real, well-documented, and genuinely different pictures. Contemporary forager and horticulturalist societies today, tracked with modern devices, sleeping in one largely consolidated block, averaging under 7 hours, and early modern Europeans, in written records from centuries ago, apparently sometimes splitting the night into two segments. Both findings are real. Neither one is how humans naturally sleep, full stop. Human sleep, it turns out, is considerably more flexible and more shaped by circumstance than either popular version allows for. There's a third piece worth adding, because it comes from clinical research rather than anthropology, and it lines up with the field data in a way that's worth sitting with. Sleep researchers working on cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, a well-studied, evidence-backed treatment often shortened to CBT, I have found that one of the most effective interventions isn't a medication or a supplement at all. It's changing how a person relates to their own wakefulness. Patients are coached to stop clock watching, to get out of bed, rather than lie there fighting for sleep, and to stop treating a single bad night as a crisis. Across multiple clinical trials, this approach has outperformed sleeping pills for long-term improvement, not because it adds hours, but because it strips away the layer of dread. That's a strange thing to find echoed in a Kalahari campsite, and yet, here we are. None of this means forager sleep is some untouchable ideal, either. Life in these communities carries its own real hardships. Siegel's team also noted disrupted sleep from cold nights, biting insects, and the ever-present need to stay alert to predators or other threats, especially for anyone sleeping at the edge of a group. Comfort and safety were not guaranteed, and short awakenings for practical reasons were common. The takeaway isn't that discomfort is secretly good for sleep. It's that the emotional relationship to sleep, the meaning a person attaches to a bad night, appears to matter as much as, or more than, the raw hours logged. So let's reconstruct a scene using what the evidence actually supports. Picture a Hadza camp at dusk. The sky has gone orange, fading slowly toward navy at the edges. A fire is burning low, throwing soft light across the group. People are still awake, talking, repairing a bow, nursing a child, laughing about something that happened during the day's foraging trip. Nobody announces a bedtime. There's no ritual of brushing teeth and setting an alarm. Hours pass this way, unhurried. Eventually, one by one, people drift toward sleep near the fire, on hides or bare ground, as the surrounding temperature keeps dropping. There's no melatonin supplement on a nightstand, no blackout curtains, no phone tracking a sleep score and delivering a verdict in the morning. And yet, when Siegel's team asked directly, essentially nobody in these communities reported chronic insomnia. Here's the counterintuitive twist, and it's the part that actually reframes the whole question. It isn't the raw number of hours that separates you from the Hadza. It's the layer of anxiety wrapped tightly around those hours. Researchers studying insomnia in industrialized countries have increasingly pointed to something they call sleep effort, the tendency to try hard to sleep, to monitor sleep closely, to dread the consequences of not sleeping enough. That effort itself keeps the nervous system activated, which paradoxically makes falling asleep harder. In other words, worrying about not sleeping enough may do more damage to a night's rest than the missing hours themselves. The Hadza, San, and Tsimane participants in Siegel's study weren't sleeping longer than you, on average. Some nights, the data suggests they were almost certainly sleeping less. But nobody was quietly panicking about the number on a screen, because there was no screen. And often, culturally, Not much of a concept of a correct number to hit in the first place. This is where the modern mirror gets honest, rather than tidy. It would be satisfying to say, just live like a forager and your insomnia will vanish. That's not what the evidence actually supports, and saying it would ignore something else. Siegel's study documented clearly. Adults in these communities are physically active for most of daylight hours, spend their entire evenings in dim, warm firelight, rather than the bright blue-toned light of screens and bulbs, and have no fixed external obligation, dictating precisely when they must be asleep by, or precisely how many hours count as acceptable. Those are real, structural, environmental differences, not simple lifestyle choices you could adopt by deleting one app or buying one gadget. What the research does support is narrower and arguably more useful. The number displayed on a sleep tracker is not, by itself, a verdict on your health or your worth as a functioning adult. Populations exist, studied carefully and recently, sleeping roughly the same hours you do, sometimes fewer, while carrying almost none of the anxiety you carry about it. There's an irony worth naming here, and it's one that shows up repeatedly in sleep research. The devices marketed to help you sleep better may, for some people, be quietly recreating the exact problem Siegel's fieldwork suggests doesn't have to exist. A wearable that wakes you each morning with a score, a graph, a color-coded verdict on last night's performance gives clock watching a permanent home on your wrist. Some sleep clinicians have started describing this pattern as orthosomnia, an excessive preoccupation with achieving perfect sleep data, ironically driven by the very tools meant to fix sleep in the first place. That term is recent, and the research on it is still developing, so it's worth treating as an emerging observation rather than a settled diagnosis. But the underlying mechanism lines up with everything else in this story. Attention and anxiety, not hours alone, shape how rested you feel. None of this is a reason to throw out your tracker, and it's certainly not medical advice about your own sleep, which should come from an actual clinician who knows your situation. It's simply a different lens on the same three numbers you already stare at every morning. You'll probably still lie awake sometimes. That part likely won't change tonight, and this isn't a suggestion that it should, or a recommendation for what you personally ought to do about your own sleep. But the next time you're doing math at 2 a.m., 6 hours left, 5, 4.5, it might help to remember that, for most of human history, and for populations living without clocks or trackers even today, the number itself was never really the enemy.